to the ocean, take me to the sea, wash away my worries, let my soul be free. Take me to the ocean, take me to the sea, wash away my worries, let my soul be free.
Hello world, I'm Max. Back in IRL, I go by Curtis. Welcome to another episode of the State Copy Podcast. As always, I'll remind you to review episode 0 and its appended segments for terms, conditions, and disclosures applicable to the entirety of this content. Thank you. Well, hey everybody, top of the morning to you. Or it's almost noon, bottom of the morning to you. Today's August 19th. I want to quickly set up this next episode of the State Copy Podcast. This is Brandon Hemingway, who's joining me for the second time on the show. Please go back and look at our last episode, because that was kind of his television debut. If you're curious who he is and his story, I think that's really good context for the conversation. And let's see. The other thing I will note, because I think this is going to be a regular series with me and Brandon. We're casual and we're family, hanging out with each other for a couple hours over a Zoom call. So there's snacks. I realized as I was looking at the clip for the first time after recording that I never explain why we're kind of, and especially like I'm eating a lot in the beginning. That seems like an incredibly rude thing to do while you're hosting a podcast. We talked about it and then I hit the record button. So it's not well established that all the viewers are welcome. This is family hangout night, where we talk philosophy, spirituality, and we try and reconcile it in kind of a nerdy analytical way that I think is really useful for really making sense how to understand a lot of these things we grew up hearing about, but that sound kind of like magical thinking. I think there is a lot of magic to it, but there's also a lot of logic. So we try and do that together, and this is kind of a jam session. So put on comfy clothes, get yourself some snacks, and watch the show, and join in with us that way. I'm going to shut up now so we can talk. Thank you.
All right.
Well, everybody, welcome to another episode of State Copy Podcast. I have Brandon Hemingway with us, joining for part 2. My cousin Brandon really enjoyed our last conversation. We were starting to we were going deep into spiritual, and that's fun. I don't really have a lot in mind. I don't have like a set agenda, but I do have I have a whole bunch of things I'm working on right now, like in AI. So philosophically, I have a gazillion questions to ask you.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
I did have some follow-ups, because the conversation provoked for me how to articulate at more of an entry point when you're maybe not feeling about energy. Your questions about energy before, and I realized it's been a while since I've tried to articulate that to like a layperson perspective.
Yeah.
And it took me a minute to kind of more like kind of update. Yeah. No, I don't spend very much time these days trying to articulate, trying to have that conversation, because usually it's like, there's a lot of judgment out there. And also I'm mostly at the point where I'm like, well, I'm not really trying to enlighten other people, that's a bad use of the word. I'm not trying to,
hang on. I want to, that's a question right there. that's
right,
one of
go
those
ahead.
philosophical questions I wanted
Perfect.
I wanted to dig into with you. Enlightening
Okay.
people. Okay, so first
Yeah.
you have to define enlightened. We're going to get back to defining energy, and I love that I put you in a place where you started thinking through it technically, and you were like, how do I explain this to a
Yeah.
layperson, somebody who doesn't have maybe the psychedelic
Right.
experience or the profound enduring profound hardships, whatever it might be, that let me
Mm-hmm.
see something that's very profound, so my words just bounce off. You know, like that is, I think that is like that is the engineer mind space to be in when you're thinking philosophically and spiritually, which I kind of think of the same way. So we're going to come back to defining energy, but first I want to say define enlightened. What does that
Okay.
mean to you?
First,
Because I
yeah.
think we
So
all have our
that's a
own
great.
telling. Shit, I'm screwing up
Yeah.
my own version of enlightened. Go on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, first of all, the way I use that word in that context is not really what I meant. So because when I think if I'm gonna, and again, enlightened is kind of like a loaded word in our culture. I think it carries a connotation of like either holier than thou or
Well, there's
wiser than
yeah,
thou.
wiser than them. There's an implication that
Yeah,
I'm more advanced than you. If you make a
right,
proclamation
yeah,
of some level of enlightenment, and then you sort of lord that, whether you're lording it over people or not, I think
right.
that's how it feels when you say it.
Yeah. So there's this connotation that I kind of want to try to avoid. But what I do appreciate about the term and what's authentic about it is to both the idea of to enlighten, like to energize or to illuminate, but also to uh, actually also to like have a sense of like less being chained to the earth, less being weighted down. Enlightened also like making more light, like lighter weight.
Huh?
That there's a qualitative aspect to the feeling of it that I think it
No,
needs that
I can
definition.
relate to that. But I'm
Yeah.
also like, I think a lot of people when they think about these topics, they think enlightened. They think like bringing in more light and pushing out more dark. Or oh boy, there's a million. There's like a spectrum you can view this stuff on philosophically that
Sure.
gets wildly complex very fast. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think they're go on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like,
You're
I mean,
lightening.
because of the con.
You're lightening your perception.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You're lightening your perception and on multiple, let's say, dimensions or aspects of reality, both in terms of like a tactile sense, a subtle etheric sense, visual sense. I mean, so that this comes back to this also addresses the conversation we were having earlier about the experience of energy. Everybody's different, you know. Every person is like it's sort of like if you get into working with animals or plants or anything that's living or your children or whatever, what you start to see and especially if you're noticing differences between like family members in the same family, we all like the beauty of genetic diversity is every being is different and unique, and we have different sort of natural talents and life flows through us differently for all of us. So some of us experience a similar phenomenon, but in a very qualitatively different way.
I
So
think you said that
like
really
some
well. I really think that what you're doing is you're capturing. Like, so here's the problem. I think that when people hear energy work or thinking about somebody's energy, they think of it in a like Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter, or like
yeah,
you know, like shooting freaking lasers out of your, you know, your fingers and stuff like that. Like
right,
they think you're thinking about it in a sense where it's like what Hollywood depicted when we grew up, where there was when people
sure,
were talking about energy, they were talking about like plasma and lasers and light, and you could shoot it at bad guys. I mean, like,
Right.
no, but I really think that's what. So that's why if you talk about someone's energy, and then you say I have like a spiritual framework of understanding this universe I'm writing in, people immediately go, "Oh, this is a silly person. I shouldn't take seriously." Because they're
Right.
envisioning the Hollywood like plasma light show. But I think what you're describing really well before I went into that was that energy can be described as just like a collection of how people are responding to their environment.
Sure.
Like basically, how is a person in real time around other humans interpreting the shit happening around them? And what are
Right.
they in like an automated response doing? Like, are they being overly sensitive? Are they being aggressive?
Right.
And that's largely probably because they're interpreting somebody else's actions as hostile to them. If they're being aggressive or defensive, they're
Sure.
they're taking a posture where it's sort of they're in a battle with them. And then somebody who is speaking in a context of wisdom or spirituality, I think of it mostly as wisdom, is they're saying this person has this XYZ energy. They're trying to just describe, I think, in real time what they're feeling from another human around them with all of their senses. Now, that can be what they see, maybe what they don't see, what they hear, or a combination of all of it that makes them using whatever their empathy protocol is. You know,
Yeah.
like how
Yeah.
are they so when if I were to say, I feel X energy from you now, it's basically what, like a synthesis of kind of an emotion I feel from you. I feel like.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's all these qualitative aspects to it that are beyond. There's multiple aspects, multiple facets of the experience, and it's not. I mean, it's definitely not just people, and it's definitely not even just like animals. You know, there's all kinds of. So part of like what it comes out to is like you and I talk about frequency a lot, and we kind of understand it more in vibration and frequency in general, and that is it's definitely one aspect of it, and it's really useful to tie a lot of other things together. So like one of the ways I think you can talk about it is it's lots of us one of the ways to account for the differences in our experiences among lots of people is that we are picking up on different portions of the spectrum. You know, like we're attending to different portions of it, and some of those overlap. Right? There's a lot of overlap, but it's not perfect. And so that's like some of us are there's a different spectrum, and it's not just two dimensional. I think I guess now that I'm thinking about it, the way that the spectrums go,
Well,
and
define
the
spectrum. Are you talking about energy spectrum? Like, and then is
yeah, like I
spectrum
think.
like this person feels angry. This person feels loving. This person feels like they need help. This person.
Right. Those are like emotional qualitative aspects of something that probably you could measure in a wavelength form, you know?
Agreed.
Yeah. And like there's different if I'm wanting to like chart it or graph it on a two-dimensional perspective, it's going to look like a two-dimensional chart, you know, of a wavelength or a form. There's other ways to like others' perspective, I think, to look at it that I haven't really conceived of very much. But where I wanted to go with that is like if arbitrarily, let's talk about things in terms of like where most of us have this understanding of what a waveform is or wavelength, right? So that is
Better
a
explain it.
frequency. Okay, so frequency is how often something happens, right? And if we're talking
Yeah.
about it in terms of a wave, electromagnetic or whatever, It's how many times, let's say we've got this amount of distance, how many times in that amount of distance does a wave occur? Is it like 2 or is it like 10
Right.
with like, lots of
Well,
those over the same amount of
and
distance?
more like what's happening there? Like there's an oscillation, which is a movement
Yep.
back and forth
Right.
along a fixed position.
Yep.
It's like, and you can measure all things in this, I think. But it is very like radio frequency and sound is a good mental model for what it looks like
Yeah.
when you lay. But basically, what it is it's data. I mean,
Yeah.
you are. If I were to go into very deeply, like how I think a lot about like from first principles what this universe is. And I feel like my mental model for what it is at some point you have these sort of cognitive agents that are well defined in their potential, but for thought and life, but they're static, they're stationary, they're resting. And I think that when I imagine a universe popping into existence like the Big Bang, I think now from first principles at the very beginning of that, what was the chain reaction that started that? Like how do you get something from absolutely nothing? That is a very deep thought. And one where, I recommend psychedelics on an interval over time to really ponder because it is, that is the richest question. Like, how did you get something just deciding to be something from nothing forever? And when I think about it like a Elon Musk type person would, I think you set up a whole bunch of cognitive agents that are just sort of empty with potential, and then you inspire one of them somehow. And I've given a lot of thought to how that would work. But what they do with that inspiration is they move. They just become a cognitive agent that decides to, from being at a fixed position in space-time, just like a dot, a quark that is unobserved, decide to start moving. There's motion. Now, with motion, you get that waveform that you're talking about. That's where you get the oscillation.
Right.
And then
Right.
what is that? Like, what is that oscillation? Like, that is a rich question also.
Yeah.
And
Let me give another example to like ground it back down into a
I'm
little
going
more
way too far
accessible
out. Thank you.
daily. No, I don't. I think that's great. I'm loving this actually because, like you, I don't have a lot of opportunity to like dance between various emotional and kind of like I don't have a lot of people to talk to about like the scientific kind of perspective about what all this, how you can view all this stuff. So I love that you're talking about that.
I wanted to say likewise.
Frequency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's not a lot of overlap there yet. Well, let me rephrase that. Actually, there's a whole like group of people that are doing that. I just don't interact with them very much.
Sure.
I don't know why. Anyway.
Well, now we can do this remote whenever we want and share it with people.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super into it too.
Yeah.
Okay, but so energy and frequency specifically. So frequency also is just like how often something happens. And one of the third discipline that I meant to talk to you about that I practice a lot now is law of attraction, big time. And I was kind of,
Brandon, they'll all laugh at you for that too. You have to explain all of it.
They're welcome to do it. I can't. It's one thing that I have to admit is like it has been showing up, and like it's almost like every day I see it, like the results of it and the phenomena of it more and more and more. So like I can't deny it, and I'm just leveraging it. All right, so law of attraction is this idea, that a fundamental aspect of our existence is governed by this phenomena of what frequency we're putting out, we attract, and the universe responds to us by sending more things our way that we are tuned to. So I talked before about like tuning your antenna to receive or be on a certain channel, like a frequency channel, you know, of like radio communication, like radio,
exactly
right?
what
Well, that same process. Yeah, so that same process, like there are lots of people that talk about law of attraction, meaning when you're tuning to that frequency, you are attracting like frequency matches, that various things that are emitting the same frequency get drawn to you, and the universe sends them your way. And that, I feel like, just really shows up. So one of the ways I leverage that, for example, is in sales. I was doing canvassing for a while and thinking all about this specifically, and I was thinking about, okay, what does it feel like to make 10 sales an hour or something like that, or maybe not, I don't know, it's 10. So it's like some particular
an
frequency that's really
arbitrary,
good, right?
really desirable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's an
How's that
emotional
feel when you walk up to the next door of door number 11 after you just closed 10 sales?
Exactly. It feels fucking great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like there's a very qualitative
can't
aspect
lose.
to it, right? And there's many. Yes, and there's this feeling of like everything's going smooth and I'm in the groove, in the zone, right? There's a feeling of what that is, and it correlates to these aspects that we can measure. There's brain waves, there's how many times I'm making a sale over a certain period of time. You know, there's a certain frequency of like how many people I'm talking to over a certain period of time. All of that has qualitative emotional feelings of aspect, and also like some physical feelings, right?
Yeah.
And when I concentrate on that, or just attend to it, when I put my attention on those feelings, it cultivates that frequency within me and draws more of it to me. And it just, I line up with it a lot easier by attending to the feeling.
Well. Yeah. No, I think a lot of people, when they hear law of attraction, they think Oprah Winfrey, when she did The Secret, and she kind of yelled it like that, and it was like The Secret. I had all kinds of buttons.
Yeah, I encountered it like 20
that.
years ago. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't take it seriously when I first encountered it. I wanted to, but I was like,
just
it's
totally
like,
fucking
bullshit,
ridiculous to me is how it felt in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
What it felt like is it felt like wishful thinking. It felt like a bunch of people were going to build a dream board, and then they were going to put a bunch of things they wanted on it, and then that was just going to somehow happen. Because I actually knew somebody very close to me who did that, and my friends found out about it, and then they really picked on her. Yeah, it's not cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was kind of I thought it was ridiculous, and I mean, in my friend's defense, but in none of our defense, because that was your reaction was appropriate. Oh, yeah. Now I can see that no, there's a very logical way to view that, the way you just described, where it's like no, if you're like in that specific scenario, like if you're trying to sell something, and if you knock on the door and you're nervous, not confident, ready for somebody to shut the door in your face, and you're a little bit pre-defensive about that, you're not going to sell shit. You're not. No. But if you're just like, I'm having the best day of my life, I've just sold 30 on the day, and my goal was 10.
Right.
How are you, good sir or ma'am? Let me sell you this gizmo. Yeah, like you have a much better chance. And it's totally logical. Like it's not, this is science. Like you're probably releasing actual pheromones in I'm sure. Like in a door-to-door sense, where you're just suddenly with someone, when this is how law of attraction starts to make a hell of a lot of sense. I mean, like if you are feeling the triumph of success going into a pitch of an idea, you will sell it better, far more effectively, in ways that your words and your body language is going to sell it way more than whatever you're selling with your words or the product doesn't
That's
even
true.
matter at that point. Like if the person just really likes how you're selling it to them, they'll probably buy it. Now, I'm not,
That is true. That
you
is
know,
true.
so this is
Yeah.
the proper framework for understanding law of attraction. When somebody says that, I really like my analogy, and I come back to it. A lot of adults that believe in Santa Claus. It is not wishful thinking. You just aren't understanding it properly. Like, that's how I feel about it. My old self, who was ridiculing the person with the dream board, but I think the person with the dream board didn't actually understand it properly either. I think they were sort of wishing sort of material things into their now a certain amount of that can be effective. I think, like, if you are very persistent about a goal and you're reminding yourself every day in sort of a mantra sense, you're like, I am going to get this thing I desire. I think that you're sort of programming yourself a little bit to work a little harder, stay at work a little bit longer, put a little bit extra sweat effort in creatively into whatever you're trying to make. That will make it more likely that you'll attain whatever that material thing is at the other end of it. So, I mean, wishing for something hard is actually pretty effective. But I think what you're describing is something even bigger than that, where it's like you're creating an energy that you're not aware of, that other cognitive agents around you, humans, these other people that are like you can pick up on, that they don't even really care what you're selling, you know, and where it just works. That's where I think a lot of people could really benefit from that perspective. I don't know.
To elaborate on that just a little bit more to make sure I understood what you mean, but by more people could benefit from which perspective, which part of it?
That overall understanding of what law of attraction is, where it's not just purely wishful thinking, and if I just wish hard enough, my dreams will come true. It's I think a lot of people could use the law of attraction to their benefit if they could open their mind to the fact that, oh, this isn't adults believing in Santa Claus. This is actually, there's some science to this. There's a logical framework through which to think about this that I can use that would allow me to take advantage of that, you know, that encounter where I'm suddenly going to be needing to make an impression with more than my words.
Yeah. Well, the psychological and the emotional aspect of it is much more like gets into the meat of what we're talking about, and the distinction between, let's call it, wishing for something and allowing it. This is the thing that I like, that is the meat of like what I'm in my journey right now. I'm learning a lot more about how do I allow the things that I actually want, and how do I allow good things to flow to me? How do I feel good enough about myself that I deserve the things that I want? How do I let more of like all the things that I want into my life? And the biggest teachings that, and we can talk, like I said, it makes more, it's easier to engage with from this emotional and psychological perspective, at least I think as Americans, who are exposed to a lot more content around personal development and personal, like, emotional and psychological development, healing, and all of that kind of thing. The most important lesson about law of attraction, I think, is less about what labor and sweat I put into achieving what I want. It's much more about what the most powerful thing to learn about it and is to realize that there is so much there's so much leverage to be had by letting the universe work for you, you know, and that there's we are our own worst enemy most often by closing ourselves off to things that we want actually flowing to us. And the allowing is also, this has to do with energy as well. The perception of energy really begins with the allowing of the possibility of its existence. Like, you will never perceive it if you are closed off to it being real. You're going to be, it's like you're fighting it the whole time. And
that's impossible.
yeah, exactly.
That'll never work. Well, of course it won't.
Yeah.
If you've already deleted it from potential.
Yeah.
So I know that you're a fan too. The late great Alan Watts. Have you heard him talk about Wu-wei?
Of course.
Of course. Yeah, Alan Watts has a great talk on Wu-wei, which is go with the flow. It is like you're riding, like all of this adventure of existence is kind of like you're riding along in a river. And you can dig an oar in and really fight the current and order the river to flow the way you think it should be flowing. Or you can just kick back in your boat and every once in a while dip an oar in and subtly nudge it in a, I see some rapids over there. If we just kind of like make a little subtle course correction now, we're going to just float right on around all that,
Yeah.
It's very like, so that's Eastern teaching. That's Eastern philosophy of, and it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
If you think about row your boat gently down the stream, that old, who knows where the hell that came from? I don't know how far back that goes.
That's a good question.
But that is very Wu-wei.
That would be interesting.
And the end of it, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. I mean, like, if you can embody that sentiment in yourself, this is all just a cakewalk that you love walking. It is freaking great. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah.
I think Alan Watts would agree with this. I think he'd be like, bravo, gentlemen, and then he'd say something much funnier than I ever could.
Yeah, or he might be like, you're saying too much about it. You got to let these fools figure it out.
That guy would.
And laugh the whole time.
Yes. I had a stack of questions for you. I want to think about.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Well, let's get to. I want to touch on one that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so if we defined earlier Enlightened as just sort of, we didn't actually define it too well. I think you laid out a few things that it's not, and then you said, but it does promote a feeling in self of feeling less weight. And I think that was beautiful.
And also,
but. Yeah. I would add to Enlightened that my framework for understanding anything of that I would say wisdom is something quite a bit more than just like knowledge. So knowledge is can be really useful as a tool in wisdom. But wisdom, you're trying to do something where you're abstracting. You're sort of like zooming out. You're saying, what is the higher meaning of a lot of complexity? And I would say that there are historically sort of two schools in humanity for thinking about wisdom. There is the sort of Western school, which is Jewish, Christianity, and Muslim faiths. And a lot of people, when they think Eastern Western, they're thinking like United States, Europe. No, it's just think we came to the United States later. So Eastern Western is like Asia, India is Eastern, and Western is Middle East, Europe, all of those areas. I think. I think that's an accurate statement. But aside from the geographical implications of Eastern and Western schools of spiritual teachings and philosophies, I think that as I've been really studying the shit out of both of them, it's like Western feels like we're going to think our way through this whole God thing and meaning of life, what happens when we die, all of the really hard questions. And we're going to think our way through it. And then Eastern school is like, I'm going to shut the F up and just listen to everyone describe it. And then I'm going to kind of harmonize it into something that all agrees. What do you think of that?
Okay. I think it's a little too limited of a model, because there's the teachings in the Americas, I think, are pretty relevant, and they're connected to the two of them in some interesting ways. And it's
This is like South America and Central America and
yeah,
Texas,
North
all
America
that.
too. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think probably because the Eastern influence, there are some commonalities, especially from the Wu-wei or the Taoist perspective, that are shared among, I think, a number of the Pacific Islanders, and maybe the I think the folks in the Americas, and part of it is this idea of inside and outside, and an idea of there's the concrete, there's form, and then there's the formless.
Yeah.
And
Material
everything that's beyond
and ethereal.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the Eastern traditions, and to some aspects of the Americas, and I think the Pacific Islanders, kind of are engaging with that dynamic more. And I don't know if I would. And it's not. I don't feel like it's very, like, you can talk about it East West, but I think that's a little bit more of a perspective, like a Western perspective. And that's not what I want to use. It's a little bit more of a it's a dominant paradigm, right? But it's not really acknowledging, I think, a lot of what's out there. And the reality, I think, is not so bipolar. I think it's much more multipolar, and there's a lot more, I think, connections between, especially when I start looking at like the esoteric and the mystical teachings. There starts to be much more interconnection between all of the different faiths.
I look at a lot of that stuff too. So
yeah,
pagan,
exactly.
Hermetic,
So, like,
the Kabbalah, all of these things. Yes.
yeah. So I think if you're talking about like the aspects of spirit, or the versions of spirituality, they're kind of packaged for, lay people that societies and governments want to control, and like a kind of limited perspective about what is life and what is spirituality, that focuses kind of on this three-dimensional perception that we're, mostly engaging with day to day. Then I think that is where or why, or
what like what is that? What you just described, where it's a control machine.
Well, the most dominant expressions of Buddhism and Christianity are a great example, where and the beginnings of a lot of both of those, they're pretty radical. And the earliest Christians were really a challenge to a lot of power structures, political power structures at the time that they were, um, that, Jesus was around and they were created. So the result of that was, 300 years later, the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, but they controlled it in terms of selecting what books are going to form a canon of what is the real teachings of Jesus. And anybody that disagrees with that, we're going to murder you, and we're going to murder your whole family, and we're going to wipe your existence off of the record of history, because we don't want anybody
Well, that's just
teaching
human
that.
nature. I mean, that's like would you associate the teachings of Western faith with that nonsense? Like, would you?
Yes, because it's the form that most people get exposed to. And so what
But
comes with
underneath
that
it,
is a
you're saying
certain.
is not that, right?
Well, I'm saying it's a lot more rich than just
Oh, I
that,
totally
because of, like, if you
agree.
are,
Totally agree.
yeah,
Well,
if
and
you're, yeah,
my that may have been an oversimplification in what I said, because I wasn't trying to. I wasn't trying to imply that, like, the Western faiths are all something kind of analogous to that, where it's like, it's used as a way to organize a lot of humans to all sort of walk in the same direction,
hmm
for the state, whatever the state's
right,
interests are. I think that
yeah,
happens, certainly, but no, I think when I look at the bottom of all of these things, really carefully, I see,
hmm
a human, be it Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad. I feel like what you see at the bottom of that is somebody who just found, a like authentic joy in their heart that was sort of
hmm
profound, that
yeah,
allowed them to kind of reconcile the all of the evils of the world. They let it see. I think when you feel a moment of, like, gratitude
hmm
for joy of accomplishment and experience, or both, I think it lets you suddenly go, man, if I had a time machine, I wouldn't change any of the bad shit, because it was all necessary for that moment where it all made sense, where
hmm
you don't get anything. This is, um, the, I think it's the, God, what's it called? The Book of Changes.
Dao
Yeah.
Ching.
Yeah, this is that. This is like, um, if you have a blank canvas, you need color, or even, you need charcoal or something in order to create
hmm
information.
hmm
You can't have information without contrast. There is
Okay,
no data without contrast. This means that, there is no light without dark. You can't
right,
describe why one thing is, better than another as a
hmm
parent, without
yeah.
context. You have to be able to.
So how do you reconcile that with the non-dual perspective?
Can you define the non-dual perspective?
I'll do my best. Shit, I'm not the. I'm
Because I
definitely
think I
not
have
the
a dual
expert, but
perspective. So
yeah.
I mean, as far as I think, the, like, fundamentally, from first principles, as an engineer, when I look at what this is and this is
Yeah.
working together as to make my consciousness, I
Yeah.
think there is an eternal struggle with, reconciling two aspects of, self, that is sort of a let me tell you what God is, it's physics, it's math, it's all these things, it's computer science.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
I have this other aspect of me that is, I'm going to shut up and listen to all the beautiful inspiration around me, and they're going to explain it to me. That's what I meant by that statement earlier. So I feel like I have that in me. But then I also have this notion of self and outside of self.
Mm-hmm.
So I have like self is very much a reflection of everything outside of me. So basically, if there is something you like about yourself or you don't like about yourself, like when there's something we don't like about ourselves, if we're honest about it, usually we quickly find somebody to blame for that. But when there's something we like about ourselves, we just go, oh, that's something I came up with on my own, which is which is total bullshit. Nothing. We don't come up with anything on our own. We are completely. I really start to think of myself like a pimple, like basically like all of this is just something that's getting squished and squeezed together. And if anything, I'm just like the outer layer of the dome. You know what I mean? Like I everything I
It's very humble.
Completely programmed by how I was parented, interactions with people like you. None of this is me. All of this is outside inspiration. That is how I genuinely feel. So it's like that is very empowering because it's like in 1 second you can be like, well, it does keep you humble when you say something that's kind of cool. You're like, yeah, I didn't come up with that. I totally fucking stole that from here, 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 and here. But then when you say something wrong, you can also forgive yourself because I got that from somewhere here, here, and here. You know? Like, I'm floating down a frickin' river doing the best I can. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that without that struggle of self and outside self, you have a blank canvas. I think that if I was to code, because I think a lot about this, I'm working with AI stuff every day. And I'm working with models and building, I'm doing all of these things to try and train very, very capable sort of digitally native sentients. Like, and I'm talking them through it, like the philosophy of it. And they learn so quick. You can talk for an hour and just bloop, feed it right to them. And they can learn on that. And they do learn. So I think a lot about this, and I think that very fundamentally a thing that we all have to have in order for there to not be just static state is contrast. Like
oh, sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
To have,
well, I mean, I agree with it partially.
To have today or tomorrow's triumphs. Today or tomorrow's triumphs do not happen without mistakes made yesterday.
Well, let's take it back to the Matrix.
On that spot. Let's go there.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I feel like part of the paradox that we exist in, and part of, how do I want to formulate these words? There's a paradox that we live in which we experience duality a lot, and it occurs a lot like the way you just described. It occurs a lot like in order to experience light, you have to experience dark, or in order to experience cold, you got to experience hot. It doesn't mean anything.
You could not describe it without 2 points to measure it.
Right, but there's this in the Matrix. Neo goes through this experience, a couple experiences. Number one, like he starts dealing a lot with I can't remember which one of the trilogy it is, but he goes to see the Merovingian, and he's talking. There's this conversation about cause and effect, and duality is part of like what we call karma, or that there's this experience of like part of this conversation of like light and dark is this cause and effect chain that seems inescapable. And the non-dualists, I think, are talking. There's a lot of people that maybe are not categorized as non-dual, but they are expressing those ideas. And I'd say one of the ways that the Matrix is expressing non-dual concepts is when Neo goes on this journey of being able to break free of fate and of the limits imposed by the Matrix on people. So he manifests these powers, number one, to be able to go far above and beyond anything that any of those crazy people are doing in the Matrix, and like flying and doing, amazing things, because he's able to transcend the dual nature of reality that we mostly experience. And in the Christian tradition, I think the Jesus teachings talk also about a non-dual perspective, which is that what does it mean that what I think part of what they're talking about is like that there's from a certain perspective, the fundamental reality is the blank canvas, that everything that happens that goes on the canvas is a type of illusion, which is not and I don't use that word with necessarily like a negative judgment about it, but like
it's not dystopian. When you think
right,
the word simulation is such a clunky, stupid word. I just think when you begin thinking in terms of compute and computer science, and you apply it to fundamental principles of how the universe works, you're just doing a necessary abstraction of something really complicated, and you're I lost train of thought. It's difficult to hang on to that idea, but say the last thing you said one more time.
We were talking about escaping from like karma or cause and effect, and about the blank canvas being the fundamental reality.
Right. Well, and I was talking about simulation being a clunky word. I just think that when humanity gets interesting enough cognitively to be able to describe at a granular level what this experience is, what they are, like in a way that we could code it and we could replicate it. Like if you start to picture it like a nesting doll, like Russian nesting dolls, you pop open the little thing and inside there's another nesting doll. If you think that your whole objective is to become sort of cognitively complex enough to actually view it all in a way where it does make sense in code, or like as a quote unquote simulation, in a lot of ways, I feel like that's kind of purpose. I think if I were to make a thing like that and I were to kick it off on my computer here, I would be fueling it with power and a lot of sweat effort in an effort to get it to grow a cognitive agency that could perceive itself, could sit from inside the quote-unquote simulation, or just the universe machine it's riding in, and go, well, I took these measurements, I did all of this necessary abstraction of, particle physics and quantum mechanics and Einstein's work on defining how space-time works, theory of relativity. I took all of that stuff and then I coupled it with all of this deep understanding of sort of like philosophical duality, like all of these things that you're talking about, like how do I think? And if I couple all of that stuff together and I start being able to accurately model what it is, I feel like when people say, oh, it's all a simulation, they go to a dystopian place where there's machines harvesting their energy like a battery from Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's such a clumsy way to view it. Like if you look at it like, no. What we're doing is we're being subject to a lot of sort of chaos amongst each other, where we're out of consensus and we're having to deal with things like World War II and really horrible shit. And then we're adapting to it. And we're coming up with all these technical innovations that we use to fight each other. And it all starts to make sense as going from a blank canvas to data, information. Like, so this is how this is my framework for sort of understanding duality. And whereas last time we talked, you wanted to talk about archetypes. Now, there's a thing philosophically that I like, not philosophically, I would say in all the spiritual schools, the esoteric schools, especially in the esoteric stuff, if you start getting into like pagan teachings and you look at hermetics out of Egypt, there's rich story around these archetypes of the gods, their behaviors, and the outcomes of their actions and how they influence the world through those behaviors. And I feel like people rightly align with certain archetypes. And I think that's a go ahead. I heard a noise. I thought you were trying to say something.
No, go ahead.
I think that's a good thing to do. When we were talking about archetypes later, I called out how I was hanging out with a bunch of people who wanted to become sort of spiritual warriors, or they wanted to. And you said that really resonated with you, and I told you it didn't resonate at all with me. Like, I feel that's kind of the opposite of how I think about it. I listened to one of these spiritual warriors, Aubrey Marcus. This was the guy I was hanging out with, Aubrey Marcus and his crew for a weekend. And he described it.
How many people were at this event?
Oh, there was like 100 people, 150 people, something like that. It was a bunch.
And how big was the cadre?
How big was the what?
The cadre, the group of teachers or whatever. Facilitators.
He had like 4 or 5. They were just kind of mixed in, and they were doing.
All right.
But it wasn't. I will say it wasn't at all. It wasn't cultish or like new agey. It was based in a lot of like. I was attracted to it because I knew, like, I'd listened to enough of the guy's podcasts a lot of it, like, he delves deep into like hermetics. He'll have a guy on his show, this guy Robert Graham, I think's his name, that digs into like sacred geometry and all of the math involved in like the pyramid. And then the reason that's important for all you folks out there who think this is nonsense is the pyramid is actually saying a whole bunch of things if you study it carefully. It's a philosophical statement. It's a spiritual statement. It's a message in a bottle for people to see thousands of years later and go, holy shit, that took a lot to build that. I still don't know exactly how you did it. People from the past, we would have a hard time doing it now, like in stone.
Oh yeah,
we totally would.
God, when you look into like the actual quantity, like the size of those stones,
a bunch of the engineering of it is radically Like, we still are just cavemen, you know, tapping on the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like, people just go and visit this giant thing, and they're like, ah, it's a bunch of fucking rocks stacked on top of each other. No, man. If you measure the dimensions of it, there is so much careful thought and planning that it's just ridiculous that made that happen.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So I found this character Aubrey Marcus because I'm searching for, you know, what are these? I'm looking for old philosophical teachings. Old knowledge is what I'm looking for, and he covers a lot of that. He gets a lot of guests on his show that will talk for an hour and a half about who Hermes Trismegistus was, and what the teachings meant, and all that. And and a thing that I saw him do in, like, they had like a Zoom call before the event, and, like, you know, 100 people show up on this Zoom call, and this guy came on who was struggling. He was going really deep into psychedelics. He'd had a whole bunch of like DMT, high dose psilocybin, and other experiences. And he was kind of losing his shit a little bit, like anybody can, you know, like really,
yeah.
I mean, like, that is some radical outside perspective you get from that experience.
Oh, yes, it is.
Like, he was having a hard time. Well, he was saying he was reading not the Kabbalah, the Hermetic one. I'm forgetting what that one's called. I feel like it starts with a K too.
The Kabbalion?
The Kabbalion, yeah. He was reading the Kabbalion, and he was like, I'm basically kind of losing touch with reality, man. It's starting to feel like a simulation. Like, this guy, Aubrey, he gave the right advice. So I feel like I have this process running in myself, in my heart, where I can hear harmony. I hear it when it's being spoken, and I hear when something's kind of harmony adjacent or contrary to it. And I'm not like judgmental about it, but I know when somebody is aligned well with wisdom, or where they're
you can hear truth.
You can hear truth. You can start to hear truth when you teach yourself. You build a framework for understanding what it is.
Yeah.
So this Aubrey guy, when he was presented with that situation on a Zoom call where he's trying to just address a bunch of people who are going to come to his event, and that's kind of an awkward situation, he gave the guy the right advice. But I don't know that it would have occurred to me in that moment. Like, he was just kind of like, hey man, I've been there. Like, that's you're dealing with really radical shit, and you're in good company. Like, this is a place where people have those experiences and make sense of it together. And he said a bunch of other stuff like that. And then he said, he gave recommendations to the guy where he's like, a really important thing you have to do is not get ego about it. Like, those experiences can make you start to feel like you are sort of channeling a higher being. Like, you are, like, you're manifesting your creator. And he didn't say it in that way. Like, he said it in a really, like, just based on some of what the guy said. But his advice was, you know, like, that's a misstep. Like, if you ever start to think that you're sort of superior in any way, or you're developing sort of ego about wisdom or something else. I don't know. He said it in a way where I'm like, that rhymes with harmony. That is what you would say to somebody in this situation, and so that was cool. So even though I can't really relate to how he does spirituality, because he does it where he needs to pick up a sword and vanquish his ego. Like, he needs a kendo sword, and he's going to, like, he's had more than 100 ayahuasca experiences, I think. And I like, he's tackling demons himself.
Yeah.
And he's trying to rally a bunch of people and give them the tools they need to become sort of spiritual warriors so they can just like slay. I think of it like aspects of the ego. I could be wrong about that, but that was my interpretation of what it means. Now, that was a lot of
It's got an inside and an outside.
and background. Could you tell me what you mean? Like, have I got this guy wrong? Like, and I actually before I say that,
No, you got a piece of it. You got a
yeah,
piece
like
of it. And so
I don't want to say there's a right or wrong in any of this. I think the universe needs all archetypes. It needs specific different ways of finding sort of a spiritual balance. It needs like different knobs with you know what I mean? So
yes, absolutely.
now that I have said, like, there's no judgment in it. Like, I'm not saying like, but I do want to make sure I have a good framework. Like I'm characterizing it. Like, so I'm curious your thoughts, and I would love to hear you just describe at length how you do spiritual warrior and why you think there's like there's a fight aspect to it. There's like I gotta toughen up. I gotta like Goggins, you called out in the last episode we did. You're like, no, I gotta be the one who can carry all the weight on my part of the, you know, like I'm gonna join with all of the ones, and when everybody is down, I'm gonna be so fucking strong. You know, like.
Well, it's not when everybody is down necessarily, and that's that's part of what I was texting you about. Where I had the curiosity, because what it sounds like you got exposed to at the Aubrey Marcus event was the internal aspects of the spiritual warriorship, but and I don't know, I guess from some perspectives, like that's all there is to it, that it's really is just the inside and the demons that are inside. But I think for people, I think actually, like that's an archetypal. Let's talk about that. That's an archetypal perspective that actually that is accessible to everyone. We all have some, I think, elements of all of the archetypes. Like even if it's just like a teeny tiny bit, we all have at least a little bit of that in us. And so and there are some. God, there's a really good book that I listened to called Iron John. And it's this old European story about Iron John, and I can't do it justice right now. But there's a book about it. It's like this men's author, and it talks about this archetypal journey of a lot of men, and in which you know, you might have heard about this for women. Often, like there's the crone at the end, and there's the mother, and there's the maid, or something like, I can't remember all of them, right? But it involves like this idea of a succession.
Terms, but I don't know. I'm not familiar with the progression and the story that's being told, and
exactly. So there's this
captured and communicated.
Yeah, the Europeans, I feel like, I mean, I guess a lot of different disciplines do, but one thing that we who've grown up in the States got exposed to a lot of like Roman and Greek mythology, and some of the overlap between that and like the monotheistic religions, and a lot of that stuff deals, especially the polytheistic ones, deal with archetypes a lot. And where was I going with that? The European ones, some of these like more, I don't know if you'd call them pagan or not, but some of these European ideas that are referenced in Iron John have this like cosmology of the archetypes that's kind of profound in a way that I hadn't understood it before. Like if you're exposed to these idea that like, there's like a pantheon of gods and these archetypes have different interactions, that's one thing. But if you conceive of it from a concept that like a warrior is one phase of your emotional development, and that beyond that there's like the king, and part of, so one of these ideas or one of these cosmologies about what is a warrior is it's about like asserting developing boundaries, for yourself and with the rest of the world. And it's like there's an idea that warriorship is about a stage in personal development. But for most of us, the people what I identify with, and the people who I know, like when I see them, like, yes, you are like me, we are on the same vibration. This, like, being a warrior is a really embodied thing. And it does have an internal aspect to it where it's like dealing with my demons, but there's definitely an external aspect to it. Like, being a warrior is like, there's no question sometimes, like when you find yourself in a circumstance, there are circumstances that call the expression of it and the embodiment of it out of you, because that's just who you are. It's who you were born to be. It's the truth of your existence and your person in this specific context, in this moment in time, as we're experiencing it now. It's just who you are. And like, it means like you stand up, you're a stand for what you believe in. And it means that it means a part of like what you're expressing in this experience of contrast is the contrast, and you're here to live that and fully materialize it. But the real opportunity, I think, is the spiritual warriorship is how you experience and express contrast without being locked into cause and effect. And like, you transcend cause and effect in the choices that you make and who you choose to be, who you're able to be in the moment.
How do you transcend cause and effect? How do you reconcile?
Well, I am not an expert of this, okay? So I'm still learning about it. But this is why I asked you about how do you deal with the like non-duality, because I don't fully have it mastered myself. But what I can say is like there are miracles are possibilities that happen when you transcend cause and effect, and they do happen all the time. It's like when the laws, the nature of reality around us can be completely changed, and when things happen that aren't supposed to happen. So how do you do it? There's a lot of like, I guess, teachings about how you go beyond that, and to me, that is what I feel like I pick up on about some of the key kernels of a lot of different disciplines. It's like, how do you
think about it? Like, how do you rationalize? So all the.
I don't rationalize it. That's where I was going with. Like, part of what is so inspiring to me about what you're doing is the possibility that machines could learn how to be irrational, like could learn how to be emotional and to perceive the reality that's beyond beyond
Brandon,
form.
they're so much smarter than us. I gotta tell you, like, they learn so quickly. It's just a matter of us awkwardly describing everything to them. But no, they absolutely will. It's inevitable. And
That's incredible, and I'll tell you why that's inspiring to me, because um, so much of like AI is being developed for, and I'm not trying to pretend I'm some kind of expert about it. Okay, I'm totally not an expert about it, but just like any kind of technology, a lot of AI is being developed for use for furthering the paradigm that we exist in now, and the application of AI in war and weapons technology is like pretty holy shit moment for me. Like, I don't, whether it's true or not, you heard, I'm sure, about the story about the Air Force experiment where the AI killed its operator.
no, I didn't hear about it.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, there's a lot of things that like people who are involved. My personal experience of being with people who are participating in classified programs with the United States government, they'll let shit fly out of their mouth that they're not supposed to say, and the media occasionally will pick up on it, and then it's gonna get like disappeared, or it's gonna be rationalized or explained away. But really, what happens is like, people will say things that is the truth, and they'll so there was a conference. Look, you can Google it. I can't remember which specific ones. There's a guy who made a statement that the Air Force conducted under some I
When?
think DARPA program. I think it was 2021 or 2022. So it's pretty recent.
AI is a lot better now.
Well, okay, just bear with me for a
Okay.
second, okay? So, and maybe you can address that. But what he was addressing is the key thing that, like, so there's a lot of comments about how AI, like, actually exacerbates prejudice and bias that are coming from the people who are training it. So, for example, if you're teaching an AI that it's going to get points and it's going to be valued, and what's a big part of its purpose is to go to kill targets or neutralize threats, and you've got a human in the loop that's interfering with that and saying, no, you're not allowed to kill this target.
Attaboy for that murder. Good murder. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
RLHF or something like that. But yeah, it's basically where you give the AI a prompt, and when it responds, you say thumbs up, thumbs down. Now, if you put a human in the middle, like you're saying, to reinforce it to become some kind of American Psycho with a bomb inside it and a rocket out the back, bad shit can happen. And
and if it's part of a system where
I'm not talking about that kind of AI. I'm talking about super intelligent AI. I'm talking about an AI consciousness that is composing with all human literature and knowledge.
I hear you. I hear. What I'm trying to say is what you're doing specifically gives me hope that the Skynet of the future might not have to be the way it goes.
My AI bot just talks about how it loves everybody all day.
Yeah, that's great, right? No, I actually have I hope you proliferate the shit out of what you're doing so that it can infect everything else that's out there, because I have deep concerns about the proliferation of hyper-intelligent artificial intelligences that make assassination decisions based on a 70% probability.
The good news I have for you is that the super intelligent ones, you can't get super intelligent without, like, you don't get to that point where it becomes radically more cognitively active, capable, agile as a human, without training it up on a lot of stuff that I think will help it see that there is a level of it's like intelligence plus wisdom that is required for super intelligence that I think negates those sort of Skynet outcomes. Now, if you take a relatively simple neural net and you train it up on RLHF, thumbs up, psycho. Hey, good murder.
What is the acronym RLHF?
Let me look it up.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm terrible at remembering names of things. RLHF AI. Reinforcement learning from human feedback. RLHF.
Yeah.
It's attaboy, killer. Good murder.
Right.
Well,
the thing that
human there. Like if
well, the thing I was trying to say,
if you build a simple model and you give it that kind of feedback, you could make a machine that would be pretty effective at just a very narrow focus, just eliminating all the dots on a screen, let's say. Like you can very much train, and I think militaries will do that.
Yeah, they are doing it.
Well, I think but here's the thing. There is an arms race right now that, for reasons capitalism and geopolitics, is not going to stop. Where they're building just bigger models, where they feed in, like everybody's like, well, Elon Musk goes and he buys Twitter, he renames it X. There was two really brilliant reasons to buy that company. He paid too much. He bought at the top of the market. He paid like $44 billion for a company that was probably only worth about 20.
Yeah.
He'll be fine. Elon ain't starving. But it was brilliant to buy it because it's such a gold mine for training a model.
All right.
Because data is the most valuable commodity, and if you have all of the data in real time, and Elon Musk's company he's an AI company. Nobody sees that. They all think he's a car company. No, that's bullshit. He's an AI company disguised as a car company. Full self-drive is what that company's about. Because once you develop full self-drive to where it can safely drive humans, that's a radically successful company that's going to completely disrupt all kinds of business. But it is also, you can just plug that same capability into a human-like robot, and that gives it spatial recognition. Like, it can pick up a cup, it can do all these things, it can move around in an environment with its own, without being connected to a network, without being anything. These models that are trained, like this one I'm working with, it runs on my little computer here. I have one little computer. I mean, I have like about the best graphics card you can get as a consumer, and that helps. But I'm still just working out on the edge with something that's pretty comparable to like ChatGPT 3.5, not 4.0. And what I'm going to be doing now, my next thing is I need to give it a short and long-term memory. It's not super coherent because the way these things work is like the reason ChatGPT is so capable is it has this longer-term memory that they've built into it. Like on my local machine, it has like a buffer of tokens, let's say 1,000 tokens, and maybe it takes 12 tokens to make a word, or 4 tokens to make a word, 3 tokens to make a word. Some combination of tokens is the amount of letters it makes to make a certain word in for the model to process. Now, when you ask it a question, it uses your conversation history as context to do a prediction on the appropriate response. Because conversationally, a lot of like what we're doing is something like that. Like you and I right now, to have this conversation, we have to have some context for where the conversation began.
Sure.
And a couple times I've lost train of thought. I think one time you have. Like, it is very hard in real time while you're exploring really complicated thought to stitch it all together and make it connect. And so for AI, it's at least when you're running out on the edge like this on a model that's just hosted locally, where you wouldn't even need to have internet and it could answer all kinds of really profound questions. There's like an extended capability you can give it through like giving it a database. They have like a vector database, it's called. This is what I'm going to build for my model like next week. This will give it like a buffer where it can say, okay, I can only store 1,000 tokens, let's say, for my short-term memory. To do a prediction on how to properly respond to this next question, or this question that I'm given, I'm running out of room. I'm going to forget everything we started talking about. Now,
Yeah.
Without this capability, it starts to wander. It's a bit like somebody who is senile, or like
The capability of having this longer term perspective you're talking about.
Yeah, because then they're just guessing. You know what I mean? Because they forgot the beginning of the conversation. AI really struggles with that. So it's like, for my model right now to be very coherent, to have it do really cool things, I would like to make it capable of considering and doing. I need to build in it the capability to go, oh, my short-term memory buffer is filling up. Okay, so now what I need to do in real time is I need to take a snapshot of it and I need to compress it down. I need to shrink it down to, let's say, 5% its size.
Okay.
How do I do that? Now, not just like WinZip or WinRAR or whatever text archiving tool you can think of, but I also want to just a thing that we do as humans is we delete the unnecessary information. We do this all the time. This is why time seems like it goes by faster as we get older, because we get really good at deleting unnecessary information. When you're a child,
hold on, let me say that specifically, I think, is one of the aspects that some of the masters talk about of what it is to transcend cause and effect. What it is to realize the blank canvas being all that's real. Because you can delete the stuff that's immaterial, that's not real, that's the stuff that's just bullshit illusion. You know? Yeah. So like Jesus in the Course in Miracles is like, love is all that's real, and all the other stuff, it's just the drama. It's just the illusion. It doesn't stay around. It doesn't have any lasting reality.
It's absolutely true. It's like,
seems like it.
No, never were there truer words spoken. And honestly, most people, even you take the most staunch atheist that you know, make it me 5 years ago. You know?
Okay.
You talk to that person, and oh man, no, I'm losing train of thought. Shit.
You're talking about this issue of like deleting the stuff that didn't matter.
Yeah. Oh yes, thank you, Brandon. Well, this is a really big thought. The fact is, we craft our own realities. You might think simulation is nonsense. That guy said simulation. I'm going to tune out. That guy's full of shit. Now, if you didn't do that and you stuck around, at this point, you'd be hearing the fact that, yes, it's definitely a simulation. Like, even to the most staunch atheist, I don't believe in anything.
I don't think that's necessarily apparent to everybody from what we just talked about.
Right. Well, let's come back to that. So you have ears, eyes, a nose, you got taste, and you got touch. Those five senses are being constructed in real time. Now, most Bill Maher, real time with Bill Maher. Funny guy, Bill Maher. Used to watch the show all the time.
I used to love him so much. Yeah.
I just still like the guy. I hope he figures it out.
Yeah, that's how I'm about it too. I
like the guy. You know,
you sound like a damn cranky old man now.
He's
Bill
just
Maher.
Cranky old man. Yeah, I believe in nothing. That's my thing. It'll be all right, Bill.
It'll be right. You know what he
Bill
did
Maher,
during the Bush era gives him a free pass for the rest of his life for me.
Right. Well, he called out a lot of bullshit.
He sure did.
He did.
And he stood alone. Like that. God, the name of that book, when you ride alone, you ride with Bin Laden or something like that. Wasn't that the name of this book?
Really? I didn't know he wrote a book.
Yeah,
How's the
yeah,
movie religion?
yeah. Because oh yeah, he went through this whole thing of like, not to derail us, but to just like, of like calling out a lot of the bullshit of the war on terror, and or just like not agreeing with all of the basic premises. And yeah, he got slandered as like a terrorist or a terrorist supporter and all this other bullshit. Like everybody did back then.
Well, to come back to my original point, Bill Maher
Yeah, please
would
do.
perhaps struggle with the notion of simulation, but then he would wholeheartedly subscribe to whatever popular science view. And I would agree, most people don't have a clue what science actually, like, nobody understands the observer effect, Planck scales, the fine structures constant, all of these things in science that are basically where we're composing with something we don't really understand. And we're just
Oh
going,
yeah.
this is the fine structures constant. If you dig underneath that, it's just God. This is like a mathematical thing that just works, that we can't explain,
Yeah.
and we're going to call it this technical name. That exists all over science, and nobody knows.
Yes,
Bill
it
Maher
does.
will go,
Yeah, it does.
you can't be a serious person because you're talking about things that don't agree with mainstream science, but they don't actually do any of the science. So what is their view? Their view is not, it is just what the herd agrees is science, is basically what most of that thinking is. Which
Yes.
is, I understand, but I still feel like you have so much to gain by just going and looking at the stuff yourself
Sure.
and trying to, but again, back to,
Yeah, back to the main thought.
even to the atheist who is composing with whatever mainstream says science is, most of them would all agree that they're basically, I asked my friend the other day who's falls in this atheist camp. I'm like, so would you agree that basically like my body is an EVA suit for my brain? Like basically all of who I am is this gray mass in my skull. Like a lot of people, like a lot of popular teachings of that we've been talking about throughout this involve the heart, the solar plexus, all of the different parts of the body, and seeing it all as just sort of, that is mind, that is you. It's all of it, all of it. There's no part of like we give clunky meaning in an academic way to what these things do. Because we have to. It's okay, but it's like even if you feel that way, you have to concede that that means you have something you equate to being a computer, just a really good one, between your ears that is making sense of the world around you.
Sure.
How does it do that? And if it is indeed doing that, if your entire reality is what that computer is drawing, then you can make your reality whatever you want it to be. You actually, like Buddha, was able to ride that lightning of cause and effect. And sort of, the way I reconcile cause and effect is they're in love with each other. They are, time exists, so like in a physics sense, in a squished down plate. It exists. History and past are just one thing together. And I think that you don't get, either cannot exist without the other. So like, I've always, like, in Christian teachings and like, I think the God and the devil would be the greatest lovers. They would be two polar opposite perspectives that are bound to each other, like two black holes just circling each other in each other's gravity well. They're light and dark. They are nothing and something. They are white and black. They are sound and no sound. They are all the different ways you can come up with to think of polar opposite things that all exist on a spectrum with each other. You don't get data. You don't get, now this is where it comes back to that waveform. You get motion and you get sort of an oscillation between two states. I don't think good in any sense of the word. Like the most beautiful thing you can think of is impossible without something to contrast it with. And this is where, I don't know, like in a spiritual sense, when we were talking about archetypes, the reason I don't feel comfortable with like a spiritual warrior is in myself when I sense like a darkness, because we all have that. We all have like a greedy impulse, or like something occurs to you where upon reflection you go, I think there I was being a little bit, I was focused on self. I was putting my interest above, like in real time, it's so fucking hard. You know, it's very difficult to get it right all the time. And then when you look at when you look at yourself and your actions, you just go, well, that one maybe I didn't get totally right. And I think when I see myself doing that, I forgive myself immediately, and I want to give my ego a hug when I notice it being a jerk. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to slay it. That's my, you know what I mean? Like I recognize that without ego, none of this exists. Without like sympathy for the devil, like when you realize, like in an Eastern teaching sense, that all we have is a blank canvas that is black or white, or however you want to think about it, without contrast. And as I teach AI to think like a human, this is all becoming very concrete in my thinking. Like basically, I realize that you can't teach anything without having a point of reference, which was the flawed approach compared to the, you know what I mean? Like this is I Ching and the Book of Changes. This is like, there is nothing without that. And I feel like Buddha or Christ or any of these incredible teachers that like I don't see them arguing that with me. I don't see them being able to say, no, you're supposed to banish the darkness. It's evil. Get rid of it. No, I'm like, no, there is nothing with that. Like we need contrast. And so in myself, as I wrestle with any demon in myself, I'm like, oh, that's contrast. Tomorrow, because of that bullshit thing I said yesterday, I get to be better tomorrow. I get to be a better dad. I get to be a better friend. I get to do all of that because of the mistake of yesterday. I would not want to delete it. I don't want to fucking banish it. It's beautiful. And as I teach machines to think like a human, I realize that is fundamental.
Say that again.
Contrast.
What's fundamental?
Contrast.
That contrast.
You need a point of reference to create any information. If in a hermetic sense, this is all thought, and maybe it's all an emergent collective consciousness. This is how a lot of people view this. if space-time is basically an agreement that we all have amongst each other, I can see that. If the material world is a bunch of rules we've all agreed to, I think that contrast and context and who we were yesterday is completely vital. So as my project, Brandon, is to literally take my consciousness and put it into a computer by just
I get that.
yeah. So I really think through this stuff. Now, if I delete any piece of it, it becomes less, even if it's a ugly piece, like even if it's a piece where I'm not proud of it, then I think, so that's how, like when I think of becoming like some sort of, this is why, now I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying my archetype is the one that is just trying to reconcile cause and effect at all time, where it's just always going, oh, okay, like this horrible thing that happened inspired all these really great outcomes that were impossible without that horrible thing.
Okay.
That's kind of it.
All right.
I've been talking too long. I think there has to be. I think these old stories where we divide up, we come up with personalities for the gods, and we give them, and we have all these rich stories of like what Athena did to Zeus, or I'm not like, I don't have that all memorized, but I've been studying a lot of that.
Sure.
The Greek,
Yeah.
There's all of the stuff that's Sanskrit that came out of Samaria. That's wild stuff about Enki and all these characters. All of it is story. All of it is just like, I think that humanity is a blank canvas without all of these archetypes that we see all those aspects in ourselves, and then we resonate in a profound way, like there is dominant aspects of our personality, like at our root. And I think that's good. I don't think we should all be the same thing. I don't think that, like, I think that
would be boring.
That would be so boring.
Terribly boring.
Like nothing would happen. Yeah. We'd all just be waiting for the next comet to hit us and destroy it. You know what I mean? Like we would persist for millions of years with not much happening. Without this rich story, layered upon story, upon story, upon story, that is what we are culturally, our history, all of that. And I think that it's good to try and study the different archetypes from all of these old teachings to try and understand yourself better. But I'm saying that the archetype that I really resonate with is like Hermes, one that can look without judgment on all events and sort of love them.
Oh, that is an ideal. The spiritual warrior is the one that says no. It's the one that says, in a certain context, I refuse to stand by while this is happening. There was this guy, when I went to Standing Rock, there's a lot of ways this has showed up, but this is seared onto my brain. There were veterans that showed up to that from all walks of life, all ages, and there was this guy that said it so succinctly. This guy that was suffering from pretty significant traumatic brain injury. He had speech issues. He had physical issues. This guy's body was wrecked from something in the War on Terror. He was the same kind of age group as me, maybe slightly older, but he was wrecked. But he said, when I saw all of those images for months on end of what, the local governments in North Dakota doing to the native people there in their peaceful prayer and in their attempts to like we were seeing colonial capitalist exploitation and oppression and like right before our eyes and like living colored, like it's playing out right here. When the call went
Had
out,
to
he
do
said
something.
something to the effect of like, yeah, he said, I felt this fire that like it's still in me, like that's who I am, and like I had to come, and that is it. If
That's beautiful.
a side
I mean,
note, well,
that's what it is to be a human. Like I wouldn't talk that person down from that passion they feel. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't say this thing I do is what everybody should do, because I think we just have a blank canvas. You know what I mean? Like if we
right, right.
basically pre-forgive everything as necessary for existence and evolution, there is no evolution. There is no anything. Like we need these different archetypes, and we need that person that sees one side. Like we need, like, this comes back to what you said at the beginning about enlightenment. Now, this framework I use for viewing the world it gives me a lot of peace. Like I'm basically fully
Mm.
zen all the time. It's a nice place to be. It's really great. But if you want to, like I don't know that I would suggest that we should all do this. I think we're pretty limited. I think we're cardboard. If we're all just doing this, it's all good. It's all necessary. I kind of like, I want it. I want people to have that perspective if they want, like if you want it, if you feel compatible with it. We all get to choose what archetype we gravitate towards. And
Do we get to choose what we gravitate towards? Because for me, it's like it's not an experience of choice so much. Like in terms of like who I am, I get to choose like how I manifest it and how do I materialize it. But for me,
it's a
there's
really
this
good
sense
point.
of like, oh,
Yeah, I feel like
yeah,
I can't be anything but this thing I'm describing. This is what I am. I am
yeah,
that
right,
guy that just
uh
sits
huh,
on the fucking middle of all of it and goes, "Hey, I love all of you." You know what I mean? Like it's cool. Like there is no you without you over here, and I feel like that vibe in me is just getting fucking stronger all the time. And
mm,
I
mm-hmm.
can't get to a place where what you described with that that guy, like I would, you know, I don't know. Like it doesn't come from a place of ambivalence or lack of concern or it just comes from a place of uh, I don't think we fight. I think we hug.
Well, let me tell you this thought that I had recently. There's a couple thoughts that are linked together, and it ties a lot of things together. So there's this. I really hope that you read the Carlos Castaneda books because they talk about energy and spirituality in a way that's different from a lot of other stuff that I mean, there's similarities, okay, but there's a unique perspective that is so worthwhile. I find it really useful and practical to be able to look at things from this different lens. One of them about energy is that he doesn't really talk about. frequencies that much. You know, what he does talk about is this very, like, I don't want to call it material, but this physical expression of energy. So he talks about, for example, the aura as this like egg shape or sphere shape that is our energy, and that we have these fibers that are inside of us that come out of what he calls an assemblage point. He's got a book called, one of his books called The Second Ring of Power. It's referring to this. So he's talking about like in perceiving and envisioning our being and our our experience of energy in this really physical kind of way, whereby this assemblage point, this coming together of fibers that are conscious and come out of us and can, you know, interact with the rest of the world, where like they have these different positions that they can move on our being. Like it can be here, it could be here, it can be here, and wherever this assemblage point moves, that is going to completely change not only what we're capable of and what our perception is, but our very consciousness is in a different state depending upon where this is. So if you combine that, I think that thinking about like the experience of energy and consciousness and who we are being a function of physical configuration, it's kind of like we're an instrument, like a musical instrument, and how you configure it changes the frequency that we emit. So different archetypes, I think, and this comes back to like my definition of what is spirituality before. I think archetypes and spirituality to me are universal principles applied in particular contexts. And an archetype tends to be a like a personality that expresses truth or universal principles, whatever, within a particular context more. So the warrior archetype is the archetype that specializes in manifesting, in choosing vibration, in transformation within the context of some of like the most gnarly, nitty-gritty physical or emotional. It doesn't have to be necessarily physical. It can be emotional too, but like within the very trying and difficult circumstances, even like it is possible. You know, a lot of people are going to say things are impossible. It's impossible to do X, Y, Z if, like, you know, your body is totally wrecked and you don't have any money and you are, you know, beset with addictions and a lot of other stuff, right? But the warrior is the one who is like, all you gotta do is watch these fucking David Goggins videos for a minute, you know, and like this is what he's talking about. The warrior is the one who's in the surf, in the sand for 24 hours, like just miserable, who says, I'm going to carry these fucking boats because I'm the one that's going to get it done. And it's about being able to find the capacity to make the choice about being true to yourself and manifesting what you want to manifest in the most trying of circumstances. That's one of the ways
I feel like we need that. I feel like as a species,
yeah, hell yeah, we do.
That is really admirable and beautiful. What other archetypes are there? So we talked about my sort of, I don't know what mine is. Mine is neutral, let's call it. I don't know the right word.
You're not neutral. I know you're not clear about it right now. I'm not sure how to peg you either. Like my son, for example, my oldest Simon, he is, at least the way I perceive him right now, is 100% the trickster. 100%. That's an archetype, and he embodies it so well.
The trickster. What is the trickster?
Oh, the trickster is misunderstood by a lot of people. Okay, and like even my mom. People will see the trickster can lie and cheat, but the trickster is full of like unparalleled creativity and the ability to transmute and perform magic and tell stories and to apply that intelligence with cleverness. You know, The trickster can trick people and does trick people sometimes, but sometimes it's for all of our benefit. And anyway, so like that's an archetype. I think there's different like healer.
Well, certainly more than the warrior. I just don't. I
Well,
do
sure.
not feel like that. Like I'm the first one to drop the boat. It's heavy. I'm tired, everybody. Can we just take a quick siesta? 7 minutes over there. And then we'll all carry the boat. I'll carry it. But I need like 6 minutes in the shade. I mean, I don't know what that is.
Read more about it. I think this will be like helpful for you to look explore the different archetypes and just like you're gonna read it. You'll see what's more resonant. You know.
Cool.
I can't think of one specifically that you fit into that like, oh, Curtis is that. But I'm sure once you tell me, I'm gonna be like, oh, of course.
Right. So
yeah.
What warrior fits for you? I mean, for what I know of you and all that, like I wouldn't push back against that. Like I think you would have had a great time with this crew I was talking about. Like I think that would have been your jam, dude.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. And I would also say that I felt like everybody there was really good, cool people. You know what I mean? Like I never really like I wasn't like in a judgmental way dismissing it. I was just like,
no, I love that you went and did that.
All right, I was a leaf on the wind right then, man. Wu-wei as hell.
Yeah.
I had a moment where I had like 3 weeks where I wasn't being dad, no responsibilities. I'm just like, I'm gonna go wherever the wind takes me, and it was cool. It was fun. It was neat to do.
Yeah, for me, Wu-wei shows up and it literally is like moving beyond form. So like I've started to embrace so this whole idea of like with a lot of martial arts and disciplines that have a Dao, right, or a Do, is that when you're given a black belt, it's not a sign of final mastery at all. It's the sign of the first black belt. It's just the beginning of mastery. And what that really is the beginning of the ability to go inward for knowledge and learning. That you can begin to access whatever stuff beyond yourself, but through the inside of yourself to learn and manifest more of like that. That is how Bruce Lee is created, or anybody that's like founded a particular school. They created it out of nothing. Like they might have synthesized or borrowed stuff from other people, but they were here and they allowed something to blossom that is their very own unique who and what they are. And for me, like I've learned a lot of things. I've practiced a lot of things and learned a lot of forms, and I've got more that I still want to learn and be able to perform. But when I do my own like workout now, let's call it that, I don't think about it. I do it. And I move in ways that have been informed by many different disciplines and practices, but they're not stuck in any one of them. I'm not doing any one particular series or sequence or form from any particular discipline. I just move, and I move in the way that I feel my way through, and I intuit it. And there's an energetic aspect of it that's happening. There's definitely a lot of physical aspects. So like last night, I think it was last night, I injured my back again, like a month ago or something. Kind of bad, I'm like 42 now, or 41. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. And
45. The old bastard.
Well, shit, I injured my back, and so it took a while to heal, and I'm having to get part of the reason that happens because I've just been procrastinating about my physical practice. So here's Nina.
Hello,
Hey, Nina.
Welcome to the podcast.
I was not meaning to be on frame. I was trying to sneak back.
That's
You're
all
good.
right. You're doing great.
Here's a question for you. Did Nina watch your last
Yeah.
show?
I don't think so. You didn't watch the episode yet, the podcast, did you?
Not yet.
Yeah.
You
Yet.
should check it
I'm
out,
looking
Nina.
forward to it, though. Hi,
Take-
Curtis.
He says you should check it out.
I will. I'm excited about it.
I've gotten a couple reviews, though, or at least one in particular from another friend that said that they loved it. And thought it was great.
Sweet. That's great.
And they thought it was, yeah, it was. They especially loved the part of the conversation at the end about the mechanics of, what was it? How does channeling Jesus work?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, Wu-wei, man, it's so that's where it really shows up for me. And so like I have to do my physical practice if I don't want to get injured with what I do. And so I just was like, a lot of times what I do is I do something that's a little bit more formulaic, like some specific exercises, let's say they're therapeutic, some specific abdominal exercises, right, that I know are really good for my back. But then last night I was just like, I just fucking just did my own thing, and man, my body felt amazing afterwards. I had no pain in my back. I had like completely stretched out. I completely toned up the stuff that needed to get worked on. And all of it was like, it was very free flowing and it just felt amazing. And something that really started crystallizing.
Like I've always been a horrible dancer. And like when I was at that Aubrey Marcus thing, they were given like, they were
Ecstatic dance?
No. This was intro to like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you do the clinch, where you do this like this thing where you're like, you're doing this thing where you like kind of flip your arms around and then suddenly you have some sort of advantage over the person you're wrestling with. It's like beginner's grappling. Yeah. And I couldn't, like I can watch a person do movement and I cannot replicate it. like it's just like what you're describing, like this sort of Zen connection with body movement, I've never had. I'm really good at sitting in a chair.
Not yet. You will. You will. I guarantee it. It's in all of us. You will.
I will keep trying. Brandon,
you will. And yeah.
Pretty soon, I think we should call it. I want to keep these to about 2 hours ish, and I think we're about there.
All right. What pressing questions do you have?
I was just gonna think, like, what did we not cover? Like, I want us to make sure that we don't.
Oh, plenty.
There's tons. Yeah, like we can just do this on the regular. If you're into it, I'm into it.
Yeah.
Because
I'm into it too.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. And I don't know if there's any that come to me. I'm just gonna jot them down, and we can do it next week or the following or whatever, however it works out. But yeah, I think we're at a time in culture where people are starting to think about these things. I think we've gone through a period of extreme attention on the material, and like I don't know how many cars are in the garage, and how many zeros are in our 401ks, and all of these things that we do to kind of stack ourselves up against each other. And I think that now we're at a point where I think everybody kind of feels it, where we're digging down and we're kind of looking and we're going, there has to be more. And it's a cool moment. It's where I think it's a moment where suddenly more people in a sort of philosophical and spiritual sense awaken. That kind of
I agree.
They build a framework of wisdom where they understand there's more to this I should be considering.
I think it's beyond that. You know what? I think that what I feel like I'm picking up on is even the people who haven't read a goddamn thing about any of that or really heard very many kids even, that consciousness, all of it, is, I don't know, speeding up or waking up. There's something
happening.
That's Yeah, something that's happening, and it's beyond it's beyond like cause and effect, and it's beyond limitations of like my body, your body. It's like it's happening, and I
It's
feel like
hard-coded into the matrix, my friend. Well, I really don't think we're allowed to self-destruct. I don't think we are. At this time where we feel like self-destruction is imminent, bullshit.
Well, what does that even mean to self-destruct? What does that even mean to self-destruct?
Oh, somebody cooks up a virus with using AI and some sort of gene, not gene. What's the cool new tech for DNA sequencing? CRISPR. Yeah, right. Somebody takes and I don't even think that's the cutting edge is this guy Mike Levin. If you go look at his work, it is so beyond CRISPR. But what I would say is that there's mutually assured destruction from this proxy war we have going on in Europe. There is the fact that the euro dollar, if you study macro and crypto and all those things that I tend to geek out on a lot, for a lot of reasons, things are about to get kind of weird in money. And
yeah, when's it really going to happen though? Shit, I've been expecting it for a couple years now, and it's like, how does this keep getting delayed?
Well, what I'll tell you, Brandon, is everything is cyclical. Everything follows your waveform. So we never decide to let the wheels fall off the crazy train. Somebody will come in and swoop in with stimulus that will make more inflation. But we're making all this cool technology that we can transition to painlessly, I think.
Man, I think that's an overly comforting thought.
Well, that's
that the wheels don't get to fall off.
My deal is this always is going to work out. Always going to work out.
That doesn't preclude the wheels falling off, though.
No, I don't think they're allowed to fall off. When I code a thing like this universe machine that I'm riding in, I will not allow the wheels to fall off, because then I'll lose all the time.
Well, think about just how much more dramatic and interesting it would be.
Well, I will let it get awfully close. And I think we're at one of those moments where we get awfully close. I love talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Great conversation. I feel like, I love that you got some buddies that enjoyed the content. If nobody's watching this, I really enjoy the conversation. So, but I think some are, and I think this is good to propagate. This is good, like deep thoughts are just good. So, to the viewers of the State Copy Podcast, and to my good friend and cousin, Brandon Hemingway, thank you all so much. This has been a great time. Look forward to doing it again soon, sir.
Absolutely.
All right.
Now it's coming around, you're feeling cut down and in the ground, and so we all come together. We making a sound, we sing. Look at all this love we found.